So for this video, I'm going to need you to go to your angry place, because that's what I felt when I was preparing this video. Let's pick up where we left things off. In my last video, when I made that video, Luna was hanging out around $2. Well, as I look at the charts right now, USD is under 10 cents. Luna is 0.0018. The situation has gotten tremendously worse. There are trillions of Luna in circulation as we speak. And on top of that, UST is so far from being pegged. Now, over these last few days, we've seen the network being halted a couple times, sometimes due to security reasons, but the last time that it was halted, they got rid of the burn and mint mechanism. You can no longer burn USD and mint Luna or vice versa. That whole mechanism was gone because I think they realized that the peg is never coming back into place. Now, granted, we did see a little push-up from Luna once that happened, since we didn't have that enormous selling pressure happening every second as people try to ARP that. But it hasn't fixed the situation. More importantly, if you have been a UST holder, things look very gloomy for you. I mean, without that mechanism in place, there's no way for UST to truly gain value unless people just want to speculate for no reason. But in that case, you might as well trade Dogecoin or Sheepcoin, right? Now, we have seen a few proposals come forward over the past couple days. Even Kwon put a proposal himself. People weren't that much of a fan of it. It was his first proposal. And then we saw some continued proposals from community members. There was two that stuck out that people liked. One is from a user called A Lawyer. The other one from a user called Fatman. Now, if we combine the two of them, there were similarities. And for the most part, they were looking to compensate the smaller holders within Terra. And yes, they were both slanted towards compensating UST holders for the most part, but it was specifically to go after the smaller holders. Because it was apparent that 95% plus of all the UST that was out there, even the Luna that was out there, it was being held by the whales, right? It's being held by the whales, which likely includes, TFL members, such as Kwon, includes FEC accounts, includes everyone that got in very early into Luna, over a year and a half ago, for massive amounts. Once you get all those people out of the group, you realize that 4% that is left, they could be fully compensated. There is a pathway for that. But all of that hinged on one important thing, and that was, how much of a reserve does LFG still have? Because here's the thing. We saw how flawless this attack went through. Now, either we can say that the attackers themselves were so strong and they had so much money and so much expertise and they knew what they were doing, or maybe we were just so incompetent in protecting ourselves. Maybe LFG was caught so much off guard by the attack itself that they had all this Bitcoin in their hands and they were like, we may not be able to save it, and what's the point of wasting all this Bitcoin? Let's think about the future instead. Maybe if we rebuild, we could use this Bitcoin instead. Because we haven't gotten much communication. Ever since all of this went down, we haven't heard much from Kwon, from TFL, from LFG. Sure, a few tweets here or there, some formalities. But other than that, there's no true emotion, no actual apology. We heard there's going to be a post-mortem about what happened. Still nothing. Nothing. It's been over a week, basically, since all this went down. And we still have none of that to hinge on. So we thought maybe, just maybe, LFG still has that Bitcoin. Because they did have that Bitcoin. Maybe $2 billion worth of what it should have been worth today. You can compensate the small holders. You can make them whole. That would be the vast majority of the community. But then yesterday we got some news in. LFG, I'm going to bring up their Twitter here. They announced what their holdings actually look like. And the biggest thing that we want to pay attention to is the fact. I'm actually just going to come over to this page instead. Is the fact that their holdings had gone from a $4 billion reserve all the way down to $90 million. Okay, their Bitcoin, in this case, they have 313 Bitcoin. 313 Bitcoin. And if we look at where they began, 80,000 Bitcoin. So it was a surprise to all of us yesterday that, wait a minute, LFG actually did what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to use their Bitcoin, or they're supposed to use their funds to protect their peg, and they actually did that. But it didn't do anything. I mean, ever since we went off peg, was it May 5th, May 6th, whatever it might be, to 0.98, right? we never regained the peg. It just got worse over the coming days, and they actually threw everything at the wall from the looks of it, and that still didn't help. So the moment that this came out, the moment that this information came out, we realized the idea that the small holders can be fully compensated, that they could receive restitution, gets thrown out the window because they have less than 100 million. Now, sure, you can still tweak it and say that, well, maybe if we target even smaller wallet holders, or maybe we don't give people full compensation from that 4 or 5% group. Just give them maybe half. When that can't even be half, it would be like a tenth. Whatever it might be, you get it. You get it. That there's no chance forward for there to be full compensation, specifically even just for the UST holders. Now, let's bring up Do Kwon's second proposal that hit the wire yesterday. And this is an important proposal because they are actually going to be putting this to a vote shortly. And on top of that, there's even a timeline put forward here. Now, I want to say this. If you actually look at the statistics of Do Kwon's account on the Agora forum, in the past 60 days, the man has spent 1 hour reading. My mic's a little too close to my face. 1 hour reading, okay? Even throughout all this mess. I think that alone shows you how much he truly cares about your opinion. Okay? Just going to start off with that. It's been a tremendous amount of proposals put forward. Some of them got a lot of attention. He has spent less than 1 hour in the last 60 days reading them, unless he's been reading them from a signed out account or whatever. But I just want to point that out. Now, I'm sure you've had a chance to read this proposal. There's no reason for me to cover it that much, right? But there's a few things I want us to kind of pick at. And we're going to start off with this right here. That the TFL wallet will be removed from the whitelist for the airdrop, right? So we know that there will be an airdrop for Luna holders and UST holders if you've been holding throughout this whole mess. Well, he said, it sounds like a nice guy, right? Well, the TFL wallet will be removed, right? And that making Terra a fully community-owned chain. I mean, I'm surprised he could even write that over a straight face, to be honest. Because here's the thing. Sure, TFL wallet had a tremendous amount of Luna. When I checked a few months ago, I think the value of their account was at $17 billion. But here's the thing, too. Do Kwon's personal wallet was worth almost $2 billion, okay? He is not excluding his own wallet. He is not excluding the wallets of other TFL members, whose values were also in the hundreds of millions of dollars. He is not excluding the value of the wallets that belong to all the VCs, which, yes, several of those VCs had wallets in the billions of dollars as well. All the same people that actually controlled Terra, right? That if a governance was going to be pushed through, if a proposal was going to be pushed through, that it was going to get past 100% if they wanted to, all that is still going to be ported over to this Terra 2.2 that they're talking about. Every single bit of it. All the same people that were in charge now are going to be in charge in the future. So the fact that he says it's going to be a community-owned chain is horse shit. That's the only way to put it. I mean, he says again, the TFL wallet. I mean, who is TFL? Do Kwon is TFL. The members of TFL are TFL. All those people are being reimbursed in this process. And as we look at the distribution here, we have 25% going to the community pool, some to the essential developers, okay, everyone that bonded and unbonded their Luna. I'm going to say that this is going to be very messy. There's a very high chance that even if you had X amount of Luna, there's no way for it to be properly counted. We can assume that it would, but probably it's not going to be. They did say that they're going to count the Luna or UST you held your centralized exchanges, but again, this is going to be very hard for them to really dial down the numbers for each person. But you should know is that the vesting periods are pretty long, right? So for the Luna, 1 year, you can't touch the new Luna that you get on the new chain. And then after that, it takes 2 years to vest or 4 years to vest, depending on how much Luna you have. In our cases, for most of us, it's going to be 2 years of vesting. So 3 years from now, you'd get your full airdrop. UST holders, from looks of it, there's 25% at the launch snapshot. Launch snapshot is going to be happening in the future here. In other words, you have to be holding UST right now to get any credit for it. On the new chain. So if you had UST back then and you sold it for a massive loss, you're forced to kind of buy back in if you want to get credit for it. And just understand this too. The credit that you're getting is another shit coin. That's all I want to tell you, okay? They're just printing a brand new coin and handing it over to you with a little bow attached. and hoping that you will go away and hoping that you will just be happy with that, okay? That's your true compensation. That's a true compensation. Now, there was a little bit of drama when LFG first put out their reserve statements, and I think a lot of it came from the fact that there's a belief, and I think it's a very, very plausible theory, that all these VCs, all the important people for TFL, for LFG, were well aware of the current status of their fight to bring back the peg. We were the ones in the dark. We were the ones just waiting for a tweet to give us an answer, but everybody else, they had Kwon on the speed line. They could send him a text message, ask him, how fucked are we? And he would answer them right away. And based on that answer, they could properly position themselves. We did not have that luxury. We sat there, we waited for a tweet. One of those tweets screwed me over. When Kwon told us to stay strong, recovery plan is coming forward. It never came forward. That night, right, it was basically the night before full drop. It went from like $20 to $10, and then even under $1 by the end of that day. And more importantly, as LFG was taking all that UST out of this centralized exchanges, I am sure that the VCs or the members were well aware that this was their last batch that they were using to try to bring it back to peg. And all these whales were selling into that, right? They were absorbing all that buying pressure that LFG was putting forward. You and I had no clue. You and I maybe thought it was just typical market buying. It's a little bit of a pump in UST. We think maybe just regular folks like you and I are buying back in because we believe it's a general market movement, but it was not. Those pumps were LFG. The whales knew that. The whales sold into that because they knew that LFG is running out of their Bitcoin now. There's nothing left for UST except for it to go down. So when I look at all of this, and when I look at this proposal, all it really tells me, you know who Kwon reminds me of? It reminds me of one of my friends, right? You invite him over, you have some nachos, you have some queso dip, he dips his nacho in it, takes a bite of the nacho, and dips it right back into the queso again. It's double dipping. We all hate double dippers, right? That's what Kwon is doing right now. He's double dipping. He's double dipping. He bent me over, he bent you over. He's going to start out Terra 2.0. It's going to give you a few tokens that vest over 3 years. His quality of life hasn't changed, by the way. Your quality of life might have changed. Our quality of life may have changed. His did not, right? He still has his houses. He still has his cars. He still likely has hundreds of millions of dollars in his bank accounts. Out of all of this, he doesn't even want to step back, step away from all of this. No, he wants to start off with Terra 2.0 and all again, just for us to become exit liquidity. Now, I'm going to play you a clip that, say, was leaked. It's between a few prominent developers within the Terra space that I recorded. Their names, I'm going to keep that private because I'm not here to kind of oust them or anything like that. I will also change their voices just a little bit. Again, just keep them, keep them anonymous and so on. But I just want you to have a listen.
I don't trust TFL. None of us trust TFL. To do anything because they've never proven that they'll follow through or they care about the people at a base level. But to give people some money to stand out, whether it's a project or an individual, and then to also give them the option of moving to secret if they want by giving them all the resources and all the support to move, only if they want, because there's no obligation to move if they help with something in the interim. So that's going to be my proposal to them. I've talked to them lightly about this already. And none of us have been able to design a recovery strategy. We're too busy trying to hold the world together with both hands.
I don't mean to interrupt, but Doge just posted another revival plan calling for a fork of the Terra chain and potentially naming it Luna Classic.
Oh,
he literally just posted
that. Come on,
that probably just turned a lot of people off.
That's the worst thing I've heard. Somebody needs to wrangle that fucker. Now I'm mad. We can't yell at anybody over there because none of them have spines. The reason why TFL runs the way it does is because they only hire yes men. That's the only reason why they operate the way they do. They only operate based on what he wants to do. I'm really sick of this. No one's going to stand up to him.
So that conversation was had just as Kwon released this current proposal. And you could see what they're kind of pissed about. They're pissed about the fact that Kwon, well, for starters, very little input. Okay, there's this huge wall between TFL and everybody else. If you might not be aware, Kwon did say that, hey, listen, we should put a Discord together to discuss how do we rebuild Terra, and it's supposed to be filled with the validators, with the developers, with TFL members, with VCs, and it's supposed to get together and discuss the future of Terra and how they can get it together. But truth be said, Dokkans TFL, they don't give a rat's ass what everyone else is saying, what they're proposing, right? There's been people in there that have been trying to figure out a plan. TFL doesn't care. Dokkans doesn't care. Even these developers had no clue what Dokkans was going to come out of. The fact they even had a proposal to put out. More importantly, they were pissed off that Dokkans was still willing to go forward with the Terra name, with the Luna name. Because right now, developers are in a very tough spot. They do not know, should they move on to a different chain or should they build on Terra? And they still do not have fluid communication with Dokkans. They simply do not. And by Dokkans coming out and still using Luna's name, in this case, it only puts more stress on them. Why would they try to launch on a network that has a name that is so soiled now? Why? And we've seen various tweets from current protocols on Terra and future ones that are getting poached to different chains. Kujira has mentioned they're starting their own L1. Levano is moving. Prism is looking to move. So many of them are looking to move. Why would they stay? And when you think about this, you got to think about the future of Terra. Is it really going to be there if these developers are moving away? And more importantly, these developers are not being heard by TFL and by Dokkans. There has even been a Twitter account set up by the builders of Terra. And they're looking to put a proposal against Dokkans Proposal because they do not feel like they're being adequately compensated for taking the risk of continuing to build on Terra. So we're going to have to see how that works out and whether Dokkans kind of takes their asks into consideration. Now, I want you to be mad. I want you to be mad at Dokkans for underselling you on the risk of UST getting unpacked. I want you to be mad at all the influencers on Twitter that kept you within this bubble, right? The fact that if there was anything remotely FUD-like, they told you to ignore it, that Terra's going to do awesome. Be mad at them too. Be mad at me for not doing as I say. I had a video about Terra being a Ponzi just less than 2 months ago. Did I pull my money out? No. I was naive enough to think that I will have a clue as to when the walls come down. I didn't expect kind of black swan little event. I didn't expect that. So that was my mistake too. But I hope you learned something. I think the worst thing all of us can always have is living within a bubble, because that's what kind of burnt all of us. And what really hurts us with Terra is that so many people did not just view Terra as a typical crypto project, where everything looks kind of shady and you try to just put a little bit of money in, but Terra made it seem like it's so simple, right? We even had projects such as Alex and Kadu come out, making it so easy to move money from your traditional bank over to the Terra network and put it into Anchor. I personally know people that were using Anchor as their regular savings account. They were taking all their money out of their checking account with Chase and putting it all into Anchor. So many people were doing that. So the amount of damage created is far unlike any other crypto project out there. Because of other crypto projects, you could look at them and they look shady enough that you yourself do some level of risk management because you're like, it looks ugly. But in this case, the UI, flawless. The community just telling you how great everything is. Experience, magnificent. Everything was so simple, right? The yield was so stable. Everything was great, and people just plowed money into it. And we all got burned. And we all got burned in the process. Even as Terra transitions over to a new chain, we have to ask ourselves, is it really going to be Terra that we know of? What made Terra special? And what made Terra special was the UST, the algo stablecoin, because it had a bigger meaning. It had a bigger meaning to the fact that, yes, crypto does need decentralized stablecoin. That's a cool idea. I see a real life use for that. Everything else built around it is there to support it, and that full on makes sense. As far as we know, Terra 2.0 will not have an algo stablecoin or any stablecoin natively to it. So why? What makes it so special? What makes it so special compared to any other L1 on Cosmos? Nothing real. So as you sit here and you try to look at your allegiance to Terra and everything they've built, all these builders can go to different chains and they could build there and they could show how that you could improve on your UIs in these different areas, right? Nothing makes Terra special once they no longer have this algo stablecoin. Now, I do think that Dokkans is going to be facing litigation moving forward. As a matter of fact, one of the people that I spoke about earlier, Fat Man, tomorrow March 18th, maybe you're watching this video on March 18th, you should see a Twitter thread from him speaking about the fact that he's spoken to a few lawyers and there will be litigation moving forward. And I think a lot of this comes down from the fact that Do Kwon went out of his way to assure the whole community that there was not any risk when it came to UST being depegged. That whenever someone brought up that issue, and we saw plenty of people bring it up, Do Kwon would shoot them down, he would call them names, and the whole lunatic maxi community would rally around that, berate that person, and tell him just to dip, right? And newcomers saw that. You probably saw that. Maybe that influenced your investments, influenced what risk management you took, right? Do Kwon did this months after months after months, selling us an idea that everything is so much safer than it truly was, because it just crumbled like this. I mean, there was not even a fight. And here's the thing: Do Kwon knew that when things go bad, it will go bad. Why do you think LFG was buying those bitcoins? Do you think they were just trying to strengthen a strong system? No. Don't be that naive. Do Kwon knew the system is so fragile, and they have to do something else about it. And they were buying the bitcoin in the process. And they had to tell everybody else that the system is perfect as it is. Because God forbid, he says something that causes people to panic and actually depeg it, as we saw in this case, right? So that's why Do Kwon continued to protect UST in the way he protected it on Twitter. He did it because if he said anything otherwise, then everyone would actually see the weaknesses that existed. But this is going to be a long saga. And I feel for all of us. Because as I said, Terra for many of us did not look like a typical Terra project. It looked like much more. But I hope you're doing fine. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And with that being said, thank you for watching.